Everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is another episode about memetic disease. And one of the things that got me to thinking about memetic disease was I was having a conversation with someone about lifespan because they were very excited when they saw a news article that illustrated that the lifespan of people within 1.5 centuries had doubled. And they thought, oh, it's just so amazing that people live to be 40 and they would just drop dead, and now they live to be 80. And I, at the risk of being pedantic, corrected them. I said, well, actually, that's not really true. What has really changed is infant mortality. If you were born from civilization, I don't want to take any chances on saying pre-civilization, but if you were born between civilization and the early 20th century, you probably wouldn't survive to be about 5. Infant mortality, especially the first 6 months of life, very high, insanely high. And but if you made it past that, if you made it to like 6, 7, 8, you were probably going to live to be 80, just like now. Just like now. The lifespan has not actually changed substantially. And it got me to thinking about two things. One, the fact that we really put this emphasis on a lot of modern medical practices because, that's what's improved our quality and length of life. But really, even in the medieval period, people lived a long time. And this is post medieval, but just look at the list of people who lived a long time. Ben Franklin, I think he was almost a centenarian, and he's not like some rare exception. People lived a long time. And I got to thinking about what caused people to die so early. And the biggest thing was not, and this is not me being an anti vax person or anything, but it wasn't vaccines. It wasn't modern surgery. It wasn't sterile hospitals. It wasn't modern embalming techniques. It wasn't, which by the way, a lot of people honestly I've heard attribute modern embalming techniques to the length of life. It wasn't even modern sewage treatment and uh, plumbing. Well, basically, you get your water cleaned from a tap. Now, are all these things great to have? Yes. I'm very glad I live in a world where those things exist. I am. Not disparaging it. This isn't me saying we should all just live in caves. But the big thing was just soap. A lot of things that we attribute nowadays to modern medicine, including vaccines, is because of soap. But we had a long period where countless babies died because even though we had soap, soap was actually invented in the Middle Ages, and bathing was popular in Rome and Greece, just with olive oil instead of soap. So why didn't just a simple matter of doctors washing their hands while delivering a baby or prior? Why wasn't that like a common thing? Part of it was memetic disease. You see, it was considered rude to conclude that a doctor's hands wouldn't be clean. So the man who actually suggested that we do this, Ignaz Semmelweis, he was rejected by the scientists of the day and the doctors of the day, and he died having been beaten severely in a nut house. That's how he lived and died. That's how he lived and died. Rejected by modern science and horrible death in an asylum is the bottom line. But why? I mean, his idea made sense and ultimately saved innumerable people, effectively doubling our lifespan, really just decreasing the average because infant mortality was so high. But it wasn't popular. What was popular was the wrong idea. And that's what I mean by memetic disease. This was an idea that was widely held that was very bad. And I don't mean to say that all bad ideas can be attributed to just being memetic disease. But this was an idea that was so common in the West. It was not even introduced as an idea anywhere else. But it was so common in the West and so pervasive and so widely held through different perspectives, because there were different arguments for why a doctor shouldn't have to wash their hands. It chiefly boiled down to the same reason, but there were a million interpretations of it, and they all thought he was a nut, this guy, Semmelweis. So when I think of the mountains of dead people that are a result of this misinformation, it's really kind of astonishing. And we're seeing something interesting now with that, with people blindly and angrily defending a number of professionals in lieu of, actually weighing the evidence. That's a perfect example, in my opinion, of memetic disease. What we're actually seeing now, because what we see now, we see these arguments change and mutate across numerous channels worldwide. I remember when, the statement flatten the curve was, the absolute truth. And now if you even mention that, people get angry. There's a visceral response if you mention something that they said. Similarly, before all that, when people were saying that it was bigoted to decrease travel from certain countries where these were hotspots for a certain disease, and simultaneously to acquire masks. Well, that was also very, very wrong, turns out. But if you mention it, there's a visceral response, very similar, in my opinion, to the visceral response that doctors have, the knee-jerk response when they were told that they should wash their hands before attempting to deliver a baby. Another one that kind of astonishes me, that how common and widespread it is. In fact, it seems to be growing rather than shrinking. And this is a controversial one that might give me some dislikes, but the reason why circumcision is so prevalent in the United States is because Kellogg, the cereal guy, he was part of a culture that attributed a lot of odd things to health, stemming from this idea that, and you're seeing it come back again, this whole memetic thing. It's astonishing how things like that boomerang and change. You're seeing that actually with the whole No Nut November thing, which, by the way, I'm not actually averse to. I think that's great, but not for the reasons why some people claim. Some people genuinely think that retention of semen increases virility, that it's actually somehow tied to life force. Well, that was what Kellogg thought. He thought that people touching their no-no places would actually make them lazy, more inclined to addictions, and just, not good workers, not good people, and, they would die sooner. They would actually extinguish their life force. So he had some odd ideas that, people should only eat these whole grain type things, virtually no protein, and above all else, to discourage people, he believed in, because babies will touch themselves. So he thought, well, if we mutilate these babies, they won't get that. And that's how it started. Seriously, that's how it started. And then it became an argument of, well, it also prevents cancer because you're cutting off the part that gets cancer. So, yeah, you can't get skin cancer on your ears either if you lop them off. And then it became, well, you're actually less likely to get HIV. See how, again, this is memetics. You're seeing information and arguments for a concept, despite being built on very shaky ground in retrospect, changing and becoming a different animal altogether, which makes it even more difficult to argue against because the reason keeps changing. It also kind of reminds me, to a much lesser extent, of the arguments for the Iraq War. Originally it was, well, they've got weapons, and we didn't find weapons. Well, he was a brutal dictator and nobody liked him. Well, they like this even less. Well, did you see how they treat their women? It just kept changing. And finally, like, I remember after he was hanged, the argument was, we won for feminism. Women are treated a lot better now. It was astonishing. And I realize I'm kind of rambling now because I originally was going to talk about Kellogg specifically and the initial rejection of soap in medical treatment, as well as the sheer falsehood of this idea that a lot of post-soap encouragements and inventions are responsible for our doubled lifespan, which is also nonsense. People are actually dying a little earlier now because of obesity and a number of cancers that are directly related to the carcinogenic environment that we're seeing. But And by the way, this is not. I can just see people now getting mad and saying, "Well, why don't you, go live like in the medieval period?" Well, one, you can't. You can't turn the clock back. You're still living in an environment where those carcinogens and microplastics are present. And two, I'm not actually encouraging that at all. But it doesn't change the fact that a lot of this misinformation, the way that it spreads, the way that it evolves, stems in some ways from the idea that a position must be held just because, it's what people are accustomed to. And so then the argument actually becomes the memetic disease. The argument in favor of a false position or a poorly held position becomes paramount. It has to be held just because, for whatever reason. And then the means by which the position is held is what changes from generation to generation and individual to individual in an oddly viral like manner. So that's the initial topic I wanted to discuss. There's going to be a lot more in the coming episodes, but I've kind of gone over a 10-minute limit, and I'd rather not be too long winded. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.